When someone produces less than what's considered normal, people start to worry. What's happening with this person? Have they lost their drive? So they tell them to wake up early, get moving. Time is money, they repeat. Or do whatever it takes, but don't stop. But often arguments like these fall on deaf ears. The person in question doesn't want to speed up, nor are they interested in climbing the career ladder. They just want a little quiet. Deliberate slowing down is a complex matter. I know it's complex because I've been through it myself. And to be honest, I still experience it to some extent. Look, in my opinion, stopping the grind isn't always giving up. In many cases, it's also a clear-eyed choice. A quiet refusal to take part in a race that never ends, at least for a while. Most people, however, don't refuse. They stay on the treadmill. They keep going, every single day, repeating under their breath the same old lies. Maybe some of them are yours. That now isn't the right time. That when this project wraps up, you'll rest. That when this phase passes, life will breathe again. That when the money comes in, the exhaustion will go out. And the years roll by. The project turns into another project. The phase turns into another phase. The money turns into another goal. The exhaustion, well, that only grows. And what was forgotten beneath 2,500 layers of hurry keeps waiting, in silence, to be remembered. And you won't hear anything you didn't already know before. You'll only hear what you decided to forget. You open your eyes before the alarm goes off, and even before your feet hit the floor, there's already a list running through your head. Scheduled meetings, unanswered messages, bills arriving by email, promises you made yesterday that someone's going to hold you to today. Your body still warm from sleep, and your mind already racing. To a careful observer, this is strange. In the old days, tiredness arrived at the end of the workday. Today, it's waiting for you in the bathroom, right next to your toothbrush. The South Korean philosopher Byung-Chul Han described this state in his book The Burnout Society, published in 2010, as a brand new form of sickness. It's no longer work that oppresses you from the outside. It's you yourself, all the time, demanding a little more from yourself. And this tiredness never ends because you are, at the same time, both the guard and the prisoner. The line between resting and producing has been erased. The weekend became planning time. The evening became an inbox. Vacations became laptops by the pool. Everything started to carry weight, and nothing breathes anymore. People live as though they're permanently late for a train that nobody has actually seen. There's a background tension that lives in the chest of the modern worker, a feeling of always missing something, always owing something, always chasing something that never gets named. And when this tension finally lets up, on some Sunday afternoon, it doesn't turn into peace. It turns into anxiety. Because stopping has become strange. Stopping has become a threat. Stopping has become silence that echoes things nobody wants to hear. And even so, this exhaustion is sold as a virtue. Contemporary culture has found a sophisticated way to turn exhaustion into a badge of honor. Whoever sleeps 4 hours a night is dedicated. Whoever answers a company message at 11 at night in pajamas with their kid asleep right next to them is committed. Whoever takes the laptop to the beach and opens it during sunset because a quick little thing won't hurt is a role model. Whoever logs off is soft. The so-called hustle culture, which gained momentum in Silicon Valley in the 2010s, built an entire aesthetic around never stopping. Entrepreneurs posted photos of coffee at 4 in the morning. Startup founders bragged about sleeping 4 hours a night, as if that were a trophy. And an entire generation learned to confuse personal destruction with professional merit. The clinical result of this model has been documented. The World Health Organization recognized burnout as an occupational phenomenon in 2019. Research conducted in the United States in the early part of this decade showed that more than 70% of working-age employees reported symptoms of chronic exhaustion. It's not an individual issue. It's not weakness. It's the collision between a finite human machine and a culture that insists on treating it as infinite. The person feels something is wrong, but they're trained to believe the fault is theirs. If they're tired, it's because they don't organize themselves. If they don't produce, it's because they're lazy. If they don't perform, it's because they lack focus. It never occurs to them, however, that maybe the structural logic demanding all of this is, itself, the thing that's gotten it wrong. The pressure on young investment banking professionals in New York, documented in internal reports leaked at the start of this decade, revealed a devastating pattern. Work weeks of over 100 hours, the expectation of total availability, the normalization of profound exhaustion. And it wasn't just banks, it was law firms, consulting firms, newsrooms, tech agencies. An entire layer of the global economy learned to confuse productivity with self-imposed ruin and to sell it as ambition. And it's at this point that a crack opens up in the picture. Because within this very same setting, in the middle of the collective exhaustion, there's a certain kind of person who seems to belong to a different world altogether. They don't rush. They don't speak loudly. They don't live in a hurry, and they don't broadcast their own effort as if it were a trophy. But when you look closely, they're always right there, in the right place, doing what needs to be done, without drama and without desperation. And here's the most unsettling part. Very often these people accomplish more than those who live in permanent chaos. They're not lazy, and they don't sit around in inertia. There's something in them that escapes any productivity book, something that isn't in any management course, and that seems to come from a much older source. A way of acting that doesn't force anything and, even so, moves a great many things. This way has a name. And the name came from inside China, more than 2,500 years ago, from the pen of a man whose very historical existence is debated to this day. Lao Tzu, who is said to have lived in the 6th century before Christ, is identified by tradition as the author of the Tao Te Ching, a small book of just over 5,000 characters, which would go on to become one of the most translated texts in human history, second only to the Bible. When he was writing, China was going through what's known as the Spring and Autumn period, an era of constant warfare between rival kingdoms. Kings demanded more conquest, more movement, more control, more blood. And it was in exactly that context that Lao Tzu proposed the opposite. The more you force, the more the world resists. The more you push, the more the world slips away. There's a different path, and it doesn't run through doing more. The legend surrounding the writing of the Tao Te Ching crosses the centuries with an almost mythical force. Tradition holds that Lao Tzu was an archivist at the imperial court, a reserved man who watched the disorder of the world deepen with each passing year. Worn out by political decay, he decided to leave civilization behind and head west in search of solitude. When he reached the last mountain pass marking the edge of the known Chinese territory, the border guard recognized him as a wise man and asked that he not leave without writing down what he had come to understand. It was there, in the guard's cabin, according to the legend, that Lao Tzu wrote in a single sitting the small book that would change the history of philosophy. After that, he mounted his water buffalo and disappeared forever. No one knows what happened to him. And maybe that's exactly the point. A man who wrote about vanishing into the movement of things ended up, himself, vanishing into the movement of things. The Tao Te Ching opens with a line that throws any reader off balance. The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. Before it's even explained, the book already warns. What's being said cannot in fact be said. It's not mystification. It's intellectual honesty. Lao Tzu is pointing at something that comes before language, something that's at work in reality even when no one is describing it. The Tao is the way, the natural course, the manner in which things move on their own when they aren't forced. It's the current that turns spring into summer without any human effort. It's the water that runs down the mountain without needing to consult a map. It's the seed that breaks through its shell without taking a botany class. There's an order to things, and trying to bend it by force always exacts too high a price. The British philosopher Alan Watts, who spent decades translating Eastern thought for Western readers, wrote about this idea in his final book, Tao, The Watercourse Way, published posthumously in 1975. Watts notes that the Tao isn't a deity, nor a doctrine. nor even a religion in the sense the West tends to use that word. The Tao is simply the way things work, and Taoist wisdom doesn't consist of worshipping that way, but of aligning yourself with it. The difference is decisive. It's not a faith, it's a posture of attention. It's the ability to notice that there's a structure to events, a direction in movement, a texture to what is real, and that ignoring that texture is the source of a good deal of our unnecessary suffering. And it's inside this idea of Tao that the expression giving title to this conversation appears, Wu Wei. In Chinese, Wu means not or without, and Wei means to act or action. The literal translation, therefore, would be non-action. That's how the expression arrived in the West, and that's how a misunderstanding was built that lasts to this day. The West read Wu Wei as passivity, laziness, giving up, a monk on top of a mountain with his arms crossed while the world spins down below. It's nothing of the sort. Wu Wei is not the absence of action. It's the absence of forced effort. It's acting without friction, without the noise of a wounded will trying to bend reality. It's an extremely active way of doing things, but free of the tension that normally accompanies the act. Chapter 37 of the Tao Te Ching condenses the idea into a sentence that, read too quickly, sounds like a contradiction. The Tao does nothing, and yet nothing is left undone. It's not wordplay. It's a description of something concrete. The sun makes no effort to rise, and yet it lights up the whole planet. The heart doesn't decide to beat, and yet it sustains life for decades. The tree doesn't plan on growing, and yet it produces fruit for generations. There's an enormous amount of accomplishment happening all the time in the universe, without anyone, anywhere, sweating, shouting, demanding. Maybe the greatest illusion of modern man is the idea that, without visible effort, nothing happens. All of nature is the refutation of that illusion. To make the idea concrete, Lao Tzu turned to an image that would become the signature of Taoism. In Chapter 8 of the Tao Te Ching, he wrote that the highest good is like water. Water benefits all things without competing, occupies the lowest places, which men despise, and for that reason, it's close to the Tao. The image is so simple, it sounds ordinary, but it's worth taking a closer look. Water has no shape of its own. It takes the shape of whatever container you put it in. Water doesn't choose its route. It accepts the slope of the land and follows along. Water doesn't take on the rock, it flows around the rock. And even so, with all that apparent weakness, it's water that, over the course of centuries, carves the canyon, sculpts the mountain, drills through granite, not by the force of impact, but by the constancy of contact, not through confrontation, but through the infinite patience of the encounter. In Chapter 78, Lao Tzu comes back to the image of water with an even more radical observation. Nothing in the world, he writes, is softer or more yielding than water, and yet, nothing is more effective at overcoming what is hard and what is strong. There's no substitute for it. The weak overcomes the strong. The soft overcomes the hard. Everyone knows this, Lao Tzu comments with a touch of irony, but no one manages to put it into practice. And maybe that sentence, more than any other, sums up the silent tragedy of contemporary Western man. We know, intellectually, that lightness overcomes rigidity, but we keep on living as if the opposite were true. We keep on hardening. We keep on stiffening. We keep on confusing hardness with strength, and strength with success. Another figure shows up to reinforce this intuition, this time not in Lao Tzu, but in the second great name of the Taoist tradition, Zhuangzi, a philosopher of the 4th century before Christ, author of the book that bears his name. Zhuangzi wrote through parables, anecdotes, dreams, and absurdities. Little is known about his life with any certainty. The accounts suggest he turned down important public posts, preferring to live simply, without prestige, without an entourage, without a court. There's a record of a scene in which 2 of the king's messengers went to him to offer him the position of prime minister, and Zhuangzi, busy fishing at the edge of the river, answered with a question. Do you know that sacred turtle that was killed 1,000 years ago, whose shell is kept in gold in the king's temple? Well then, do you think that turtle would rather be dead and worshipped, or alive and dragging its tail in the mud? The messengers gave the obvious answer, alive and in the mud. Then leave me here, Zhuangzi said, and he went back to fishing. In one of the best-known chapters of the book, the story of the cook Ding appears. Ding was a cook for a nobleman, and his specialty was butchering oxen. But the way he did it intrigued the lord he worked for. His knife lasted 19 years without needing to be sharpened, while the knives of other cooks wore out in a few months. The nobleman asked for an explanation. Ding answered calmly. Early in his life, when he looked at an ox, he saw only a whole ox, a solid block to be cut. After 3 years, he stopped seeing the whole ox. Instead, he started to see the natural joints, the empty spaces between the bones, the junctions where the structure was asking to be opened up. Today, Ding said, I don't cut, I find. My knife doesn't go up against the flesh. My knife glides through the places where there was already space. That's why it doesn't wear out. That's why I don't get tired. The lesson is direct, and it crosses millennia without losing any of its force. Mastery isn't violence. Mastery is alignment. The true master doesn't beat the object by force. He perceives the object from within, finds its own lines, and acts inside them. But there's a question that hasn't been asked yet, and it's the most dangerous one of all. If this wisdom has existed for more than 2 millennia, if it's been written in more than 800 languages, if it crossed empires, religions, revolutions, and entire centuries, why is it still, even today, so rarely practiced? Why does someone reading the Tao Te Ching for the first time feel something stir inside their chest, and at the same time, within a few days, go right back to the same old treadmill? The answer, as always happens with the most uncomfortable truths, is closer to the mirror than to the bookshelf. But let's get there slowly. Think about how much, in your own life, you try to cut through by force when finding the joint would have been enough. The relationship you keep pushing, the project you keep dragging along. Tiredness, most of the time, isn't a lack of strength. It's an excess of strength in the wrong place. It's the dull knife on the bone, when what was missing was 1 millimeter to the left, and the passage was already open. The knife of the cook Ding is a mirror. Look at your own wear and tear, and ask yourself, without any drama, where exactly am I cutting through flesh when I should be finding space? In another passage of the same book, Zhuangzi tells the story of the useless tree. A carpenter was walking through the countryside with his apprentice when he passed by an enormous tree, ancient, twisted, gnarled. The apprentice was amazed. He had never seen a tree that big. Why doesn't the master cut it down? The carpenter answered with disdain. That tree is good for nothing. Its wood is too crooked for beams, too rotten for boats, too irregular for furniture. It's useless. And it's exactly because of that, Zhuangzi added, that it reached that age. Every straight and useful tree was cut down early, turned into a table, into a roof, into a coffin. The useless tree survived, and now it gives shade to hundreds of people who rest beneath its branches. There's an uncomfortable silence in this parable, and it hits modern life squarely. The contemporary obsession with usefulness is total. Every minute has to pay off. Every hobby has to turn into a source of income. Every friendship has to serve some purpose. Every book you read has to be productive. Every walk has to count steps. Every meal has to optimize nutrients. Calculation has invaded the last corner of existence. But the Taoist tradition whispers a dangerous question. What if this obsession with being useful is precisely what's shortening our lives? Maybe there's, in refusing certain races, a deep form of survival. Maybe the crooked branch, the wasted time, the afternoon with no purpose, the Sunday with no output, are exactly what's keeping us on our feet. The useless tree is, in the end, the tree that still breathes. And maybe this is exactly the right place for a small detour, because understanding this tree intellectually is one thing. Living like it, in the middle of the world's noise, is something completely different. Understanding philosophy is interesting. Practicing philosophy can change your life. If something here is already stirring something inside you, start with the link I left in the first pinned comment. Henry David Thoreau, a 19th century American writer who withdrew to a cabin near Walden Pond in Massachusetts, wrote in 1854 a sentence that could have been signed by Zhuangzi. The mass of men led lives of quiet desperation. What is called resignation is confirmed desperation. Thoreau didn't know Taoism at the depth we know it today, but he arrived at the same point by another route. He observed that, in a culture obsessed with work and production, most people spend their lives buying objects with time that can never be bought back. And maybe the parable of the useless tree still has the power, even today, to call into question the entire way Western man defines the value of a life. Zhuangzi has a third image worth holding on to. Imagine you're sailing down a river, in your canoe, alone, on a quiet late afternoon. Suddenly, another canoe hits yours, hard, and almost knocks you into the water. You turn around, furious, ready to yell at whoever was steering it. But when you look, you realize the canoe was empty. No one inside. Just a loose canoe, carried along by the water. The anger, in that instant, dissolves. The impact was the same. The shock was the same. The damage was the same. But the interpretation changes everything. Zhuangzi says, let your life be like an empty boat. And even more than that, let yourself learn to see the empty boats that cross your path. Most human suffering comes from attributing intention to what is only movement. The driver who cut you off in traffic didn't wake up in the morning thinking about ruining your day. He was just distracted, maybe as tired as you are. The co-worker who fired off a rude email wasn't plotting some calculated revenge. He was just sinking into a hard moment you knew nothing about. The partner who stayed silent during dinner wasn't punishing you. He just didn't know yet what to say. Life is full of empty boats, and we, without realizing it, shout at every single one. Wu Wei begins right there. It begins with no longer fighting against what never had any intention against us. Saving the energy of outrage for the things that actually deserve outrage, and letting the natural passing of things go on when it's only a passing. Lao Tzu, in chapter 24 of the Tao Te Ching, laid out in a dry voice one of the most uncomfortable truths of the book. He who stands on tiptoe doesn't stand steady. He who takes strides too long doesn't walk. The image is simple, almost silly, but the application is devastating. In almost everything that matters in life, excess effort destroys the very result you're after. The more you try to impress someone, the less they see you. The more you push a conversation toward a specific emotional place, the less the other person opens up there. The more you push a team, the less the team produces. The more you demand respect by shouting, the less respect you get. Desire, when it turns into tense urgency, pushes away the very thing it wants most. There's a modern technical name for a similar phenomenon. Experimental psychology calls it ironic processes of the mind. The classic studies on the subject showed that the more someone tries not to think about a white bear, the more the white bear shows up. The more someone tries to force themselves to sleep, the more solid the insomnia becomes. The more someone tries to look calm in front of others, the more the tension leaks out across their face. Direct effort, in a whole range of life's areas, produces the opposite of what's intended. Not because the desire is wrong, but because the way of going after it is misguided. Lao Tzu had already written in ancient Chinese what experimental science would confirm centuries later. The practical consequence of this is enormous. There are areas of life where insisting harder is exactly what cancels the result. Anyone who has trouble sleeping knows this. Anyone who waits anxiously for a response knows this. Anyone who wants to deserve someone's love knows this. Anyone who tries to force the inspiration to write knows this. In all of these situations, pulling back isn't cowardice. Pulling back is strategy. It's giving the process back the space it needs in order to happen. The seed doesn't grow faster if you dig up the soil every day to check. It grows because you get out of its way. And here another disturbing image from the Tao Te Ching shows up. In chapter 11, Lao Tzu writes something that sounds like a riddle, but is pure reasoning. 30 spokes converge at the hub of a wheel, but it's the emptiness at the center that makes the wheel useful. We shape clay to make a pot, but it's the empty space inside it that makes it useful. We cut doors and windows to make a house, but it's the inner emptiness that makes it livable. Usefulness, Lao Tzu observes, is born of what isn't filled. The function of a container lies in its empty interior. The function of a blank page lies in what it hasn't yet received. This image should be hanging on the wall of every modern office. Contemporary life is a race to fill. Fill the calendar, fill the free time, fill the silence, fill the notes app, fill the social media feed, fill the house with objects, fill the mind with information. And yet, it's precisely emptiness, everywhere, that makes the structure useful. A calendar with no blank space leaves no room for thinking. A head with no silence leaves no room for a new idea. A room too full doesn't allow you to be in it. A conversation in which no one listens isn't a dialogue. Emptiness isn't waste. Emptiness is the condition. It's what allows, precisely, for something to finally happen. But if emptiness is so useful, why does it hurt so much? Why do so many people feel uncomfortable with an afternoon that has nothing scheduled? Why do so many people pull out their phone every time they wait 3 minutes in line at the coffee shop? There's a deep psychological resistance to simply being. Observers of digital culture describe how late capitalism destroyed the concept of pause. Sleep is the last territory of human existence that can't be monetized. And even sleep today is the subject of apps, of measurements, of optimizations. Being awake turned into being productive. Being still turned into being behind. Being silent turned into falling behind. And there's something even more uncomfortable. Silence doesn't bother us because it's silence. It bothers us because it reveals. When you stop running, what was being drowned out by the noise shows up. The doubt about the path you chose. The unease in the relationship that looks stable. The question about the job that takes up most of your day. The feeling you've been putting off for months. Leaving for later. Leaving forever. The question of who you've become. Wu Wei doesn't, first of all, demand technique. It demands courage. The courage to stop and face what shows up when the noise dies down. A lot of people prefer exhaustion precisely because exhaustion spares them that encounter. Tiredness is also an escape. It might just be, in our era, the most sophisticated escape there is. A study conducted by a prestigious American university offered an impressive demonstration of this escape. The researchers left participants alone in a room, without a phone, without books, without any distractions at all, with the single instruction to sit and think for 15 minutes. In the same room, there was a button that, if pressed, delivered a small, uncomfortable electric shock. Before the experiment, all of them had said they would pay to avoid that shock. And even so, a significant portion preferred to push the button rather than stay in silence with their own thoughts. Adults, healthy, in full possession of their faculties, preferred physical pain to their own thinking. That's the size of the problem. That's the size of the escape that has become the default. In chapter 29 of the Tao Te Ching, Lao Tzu touches on another paradox, this time about control. The one who tries to shape the world, he wrote, will never succeed. The world is a sacred vessel that cannot be manipulated. Whoever manipulates, ruins. Whoever grasps, loses. Lao Tzu isn't saying that man shouldn't act. He's saying that man can't impose form. He can offer, suggest, plant, wait, adjust. But he can't bend. Nothing that is alive responds well to being bent by someone else's will. And this law, which sounds abstract, silently governs almost every one of our everyday frustrations. The application of this idea to private life is especially delicate. Think about the father who tries to control every decision his son makes and finds out years later that the son grew up quiet, distant, resentful, hiding his own choices to avoid facing his father's verdict. Think about the husband who tries to shape his partner to his liking and realizes at some point in his life that the woman he wanted to be with had a way of her own, and that this way was slowly being erased along with her desire. Think about the manager who centralizes everything with no room, no trust, no breathing space, and watches his team lose initiative, talent, creativity, while he himself drowns in small details he should never have kept hold of. In each one of these cases, the desire was genuine. The intention was good. But the method killed exactly what was meant to be preserved. Excessive control in every area of human life kills the life of what it's controlling. Wu Wei proposes another path. Instead of shaping, observing. Instead of demanding, knowing. Instead of pushing, suggesting. Instead of shouting, waiting for the moment when the other person is ready to listen. Instead of planning every move in advance, reading the course of the day and acting when it opens up. It's not easy. It's counterintuitive. It goes against centuries of a Western upbringing that taught us that a man is made by his will, that character is proven through effort, that manhood lies in control. But in almost every human relationship, what actually creates closeness is the opposite of pressure. It's presence without an agenda. It's listening without urgency. It's the gesture that demands no return. The Tao Te Ching already said it, back in chapter 3, that the sage acts without claiming credit for the action, completes the work, and doesn't cling to it. Here it's important to make a distinction that settles everything. Wu Wei is not giving up. And this difference, however subtle it may seem, is the difference between an awake life and one that's gone dim. The person who gives up stops being present. They shrink, shut down, freeze, go silent. The person who flows, on the other hand, is completely present, but without any conflict with what's real. The athlete at the peak of performance isn't using brute force. In interviews with Olympic athletes recorded over the course of several decades, the same description shows up with surprising frequency. A feeling of lightness, of time stretching out, of actions appearing on their own. The Hungarian-American psychologist Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi of the University of Chicago documented this state in hundreds of professionals and named it flow in his book of the same title, published in 1990. The parallel with Wu Wei is direct, and Csikszentmihalyi himself acknowledged the connection in various academic texts throughout his career. The musician playing in a state of flow isn't thinking about each note. The note just appears. The writer writing in a state of flow isn't hunting for each word. The word springs up on its own. The surgeon in a state of flow isn't reviewing manuals during the procedure. The hand moves on its own, trained by years of practice that have now condensed into instinct. In all of these cases, the prior effort existed, and it was enormous. But in the instant of action, that effort transmutes into something different. It turns into readiness, into reading, into attention without tension. That's exactly the point of Wu Wei. It's not the absence of preparation. It's the absence of friction in the moment of execution. It's the kind of strength that only appears when the will learns to stop shouting. The most radical practical application Lao Tzu suggests is unsettling to modern man. In chapter 48 of the Tao Te Ching, he writes a sentence that sounds like an anti-self-help recipe. In the pursuit of knowledge, something is added every day. In the pursuit of the Tao, something is dropped every day. You subtract and subtract and subtract until you arrive at non-action. And in non-action, nothing is left undone. The direction is radically opposite to that of contemporary culture, which always preaches adding. Add a skill, add a language, add a contact, add a course, add a supplement, add a platform, add a device. The premise is never questioned. More equals progress. Lao Tzu proposes the opposite. The good life begins with subtraction. Ask yourself, honestly, what you need to stop doing so that the essential can finally breathe. Which commitments are on the calendar out of inertia and not out of choice? Which relationships are maintained out of guilt and not out of affection? Which habits of consumption fill up your time and not your soul? Which repeated thoughts drain energy without producing anything new? Every full house needs, at some point, a clean out. Every full mind needs, at some point, that same gesture. What you gain when you let go, more often than not, is worth more than what you win when you pile things up. Life doesn't get smaller when you subtract. It gets sharper. It gets more your own. The second practical application touches on something equally fundamental, which is recognizing the right moment. The Taoist tradition emphasizes that wisdom doesn't lie only in knowing what to do, but in knowing when. There are moments when the best move is to step forward, and there are moments when the best move is to step back. There are windows that open for an instant, and whoever is paying attention notices them. And there are doors that closed a long time ago, and whoever insists keeps banging their shoulders against them. Wu Wei is discernment. It's the ability to read the timing of things and to act in step with that timing, instead of shoving against a clock no one is listening to. There's a conversation you've been putting off for months, and you sense somehow that today would be the day to have it. There's a relationship you've been keeping going for years out of habit, and your body has already told you 1,000 times that this relationship ended well before your mind got around to admitting it. Maybe there's also that career that used to feel like yours, and that today only holds up out of fear of starting over. And there's always that old dream that comes back quietly, and that you smother with tasks so you don't have to look at it. Wu Wei doesn't tell you, anywhere, which decision to make. Wu Wei teaches you, instead, to notice the movement of things, to understand when reality is pushing you somewhere, and when you're swimming, all by yourself, against it. Knowing the right moment is a kind of intelligence that no productivity book can teach, because it doesn't fit into a spreadsheet. It only shows up when the noise drops and attention turns back inward. To close out this conversation, it's worth returning to the image that opened the way: water. Lao Tzu didn't choose that figure for the sake of aesthetics. He chose it because it carries, silently, everything that Wu Wei proposes. Water doesn't show off. It doesn't announce itself. It doesn't compete, and yet it wins. It doesn't confront, and yet it shapes. It doesn't run, and yet it gets there. It doesn't display effort, and yet it sustains all the life on the planet. Whoever lives according to Wu Wei isn't the one with less will. They're the one carrying less friction. They keep wanting, keep acting, keep building, but they do it from another route, not from fear, hurry, desperation, or the constant need to prove themselves in front of others, from precisely the opposite, from a quiet trust in the breathing of things, and from a fine perception of where their own will fits in. And maybe that's the final invitation. For 1 week, stop forcing and start observing. Don't decide anything big. Don't announce any radical change. Just reduce, for 7 days, the amount of energy spent pushing what isn't ready yet. Notice the traffic, without fighting it. Notice the line at the coffee shop, without getting irritated. Notice the silence inside the house, without immediately filling it with sound. Notice your breathing before you answer a difficult message. Notice the tiredness at the end of the day, and ask, honestly, what it's trying to say. Notice the urge to escape, and ask what exactly you're running from. Most of life asks for less than we think. And maybe the oldest secret in the world, written more than 2,500 years ago in a language few people read, is exactly this. It's not doing more. It's doing with less friction. It's not running. It's being present. It's not dominating. It's flowing. And when finally a person understands this, life stops being a treadmill and once again becomes a river. If something here touched you, leave your like, subscribe to this channel, and consider joining our members club, where we go deeper into these conversations in exclusive meetings. See you next time.